Hi there, welcome along to our Game Changers NI webinar event. We're really glad you could join us. My name is Anne Smith and I am the sponsorship lead for Electric Ireland here in Northern Ireland. Tonight we're going to be joined by an incredible panel of coaches and former and current athletes, and we're going to talk about the challenges facing coaches when they maybe transition into coaching females, or just generally the differences between coaching males and females. We're going to draw out some insights and hopefully some expert advice from our panel, which will hopefully help coaches across all different sports in Northern Ireland. We would love to hear from you throughout the event. So I think on the website, if you look in below, there is an opportunity to ask questions, or you can follow the conversation across social media on our hashtag GameChangersNI. Electric Ireland is proud to be the women's and girls partner for the Irish FA. Our mission with the Game Changers campaign, that's the overarching name of our campaign, is to enable and empower girls and women to participate and excel in their chosen sport. We launched the Game Changers campaign in 2017 with the Irish FA, and it was initially a grassroots campaign designed to increase participation. And within the first 18 months, we saw a huge 25% increase in participation locally. That really encouraged us and buoyed us on, and in 2019 we took on the senior international team and the excellence programme, which is the performance pathway. This has changed the conversation for women locally, and we are really proud what we've been able to do with the Irish FA. We're really thrilled that the international women's team are now dubbed the history makers. They have reached the playoffs for the Euro 2022, and we're going to chat to Kenny Shiels, the team's manager, later on. We really hope that by creating insightful and useful content like this, that we can help the women's sport movement in Northern Ireland to grow and to develop. So, shall we get started and hear from some other people apart from me? Before we join the panel, we're going to chat to Kenny Shiels. So, Kenny is the manager of the Northern Ireland women's team, and to anybody involved in local football, he probably doesn't need much introduction. But just to ensure that everybody is up to speed, Kenny has coached at all levels of the game, following on from a successful playing career. He has coached and managed teams including Tranmere Rovers, Kilmarnock and Derry City, as well as the under-17 Northern Ireland boys team. Kenny took over as coach of the senior women's team in, I think it was May 2019, and it's fair to say that he has been able to really bring out the best within this group. So Kenny, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Hi there. We've only got 10 minutes and I know we could both chat for a bit longer, so we'll try and keep to our time. We were really excited today to hear the IFA and the English FA announce a friendly taking place later this month. This is part of the preparation for the Euro playoff game that we are playing in April. This will be a hugely challenging game for our team. What have been your biggest challenges since you took on the role within the women's team?
Well, when I went in at first, I felt there was an apathy in the atmosphere. So I had to direct all my attention towards creating a dynamic that will help us to bring more enjoyment in the first stage, and then more success more laterally to that. And as it transpired, that's probably the sequence at which it was carried out. And you know, the girls have been absolutely brilliant. People say, "Oh, Kenny, you've done a great job," but it's not about me, it's about the girls, and I want to emphasize that. Their total commitment, their loyalty, their trust. When I went in at first, I put 4 words, no fancy speaking or no fancy speech or introduction. I put 4 words up on the whiteboard. Sorry, 1 word up on the whiteboard with 5 letters, and it was trust. So that became quite emphatic, because for a start, if you can't do anything without trust. And as a group, in probably individual sports, it's different, but in team sports, if you've got trust, then you've cracked it. And everybody must trust each other, they must trust themselves. And we built on that there, that 1 word, and I felt that was quite significant in how we progressed.
And had you coached women's footballers before?
Yeah, in 2003, I was asked to help with Newton Abbey Strikers, they were called then, which is now Crusaders. and took them into Europe and to Sweden. And, you know, we got the first point ever. We drew with Romania, the Romanian champions, sorry. And that was the first point that women's football ever got in Europe. So I feel a wee bit of success amongst that. Yeah. So, and Julie Nelson was playing for them then. And so I see a lot of the players that were playing then are now working in football still, which is fantastic, because there's great opportunities for young girls, not only as footballers, but also as coaches in the future coming along. And there's lots of our senior players are very interested in that side of it.
And that's critical as well, to drive the game forward, to bring the players who have enjoyed playing into administration and coaching as well.
It's fantastic, because if you play the numbers game, when we played Belarus, I started to look them up and try to find out about the culture of the country first. They had 1,800 adult teams, and in Northern Ireland we have 1,800 adult players. It was quite a bizarre comparison, which means they have a player pool to pick from, and it's a massive, what people do underneath the clubs, the NIFL and NAWFA, you know, those clubs are paramount to the progress and how many players we can bring through to choose from.
Absolutely. And how have the team responded to you over the last couple of years?
I think we've got good mutual trust in each other. You know, we can have some fun and have some humour about the place as well. But the human functioning and the interaction of their drive and the forces, we work on the cognitive psychology to make sure that the players are understanding of what we need, but self-awareness is so important. And there's two types of people in sport. There's the ego-led and there's the task-led. And I have to emphasize that if you've got a football team or any team, a hockey team, you can't have 11 ego-leds and you can't have 11 task-led people. It's about artists and soldiers. I always use the analogy, you know, if you've got 3 artists in the football team, we call artists the ones who are intellectual footballers. They've got that flair about them. And then the soldiers are the ones who will do anything for the team, and they'll work to their utmost level to make sure we get a result. You can't have a full team of them. Equally, you can't have a full team of artists. And I always use that analogy when I'm speaking about teams. And the girls are very clued in to what we want to achieve, but more how we actually do achieve something.
You spoke after the games in December about how the emotion within the team and that emotion within the squad really drives you. Is that something that is new in terms of working with the women?
Well, can I tell you something, and I hope this isn't too controversial. I don't think it is, because I find
a few minutes in, can I come on?
the paternal relationship is the closest relationship of them all, between a male and a female. And I find the male, if we go down through the science of it, women will do more for a male than they will for a female. And it could be wrong, but that's the way I've always seen it. And I think that they've been fantastic to coach, to work with, to improve upon. And, you know, if we can keep producing high quality and highly competitive practices, we can definitely improve. And within the person, we've got to improve that first.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's definitely a line that we can ask the rest of the panel about, because it's maybe one that's up for debate in terms of women will do more for a male coach because of that paternal relationship. So I think we'll maybe broaden it out now to the rest of the panel. Thank you, Kenny. We're going to hopefully see the rest of the panel, and then I'll introduce everybody. So we have Neal Johnston from Ulster Rugby on. Neal is a development officer with specific responsibility for the women's and girls game, but has a wealth of experience in coaching as well as a master's in sports coaching. We also have Tom Causer as club and workforce manager at Netball Northern Ireland. Tom manages and oversees the officiating and coaching systems, but also has vast experience in high performance level sport as well. So welcome, Tom. Gail Redmond, who I know well, is the Women's Domestic Manager at the Irish FA and former head coach at Glentoran. As a former player, Gail will offer us a valuable insight as both coach and player. So welcome along, Gail. And then Breed Corkery. So Breed, we are thrilled to have you along here tonight all the way from County Cork. Breed is one of the most successful GA players in history, winning an incredible 18 All-Ireland medals across football and camogie. Breed, you're a legend of the game. We're delighted to have you along here tonight and excited to hear your views as well. So we're going to take a number of topics that we have been floating on social media all week, and we'll discuss them all point by point. So if you have any questions throughout the evening, anybody that's watching along, please use the website function to ask the question or use the Game Changers NI hashtag. So our first quote is around coachability, and we're going to ask Neal about it. So it should come up on the screen. So on the whole, females tend to be more coachable than males, and that's from Neal Johnston, who is a sports and leadership nutrition scientist. So Neal, do you agree with that statement that females tend to be more coachable?
I think probably the short answer is yes, but obviously different contexts and different individuals, will always be exceptions. But to try and answer the question, I'm going to try and come at it two ways. So maybe look at some generalizations of the differences I've found between boys and girls from a rugby perspective, and then maybe touch on a wee thing that I've tried to do in my own experience with the interpro sport. So, historically, girls maybe haven't had as much exposure to sport at a young age as boys have, whereas boys tend to start particularly rugby from a very young age. Also, from a media point of view, girls maybe don't have the exposure to women and girls game on the media and the lack of role models, whereas the boys, the coming to the men's game and the multiple role models. I think one thing I've definitely found is that the girls tend to work better as a team naturally, whereas the boys, it seems to have to be encouraged. It's more about the individual than it comes to the boys. I think the girls prefer a tactic game and a skillful game, whereas you can see in the modern men's game it's a lot more about power and aggression. I think actually the girls' game is probably a purer version of the game, and the World Cup final at Glentoran Stadium a few years back was for me one of the best games played at Glentoran Stadium. Big difference for me in terms of what challenges me as a coach with regard to coaching the girls. We get a lot more whys and hows from the girls, whereas the boys tend to just get on with it. A couple of things maybe on a physiological side of things as well to consider is that, girls mature earlier, so there are biological things there. So things like menstrual cycles that maybe impact upon their training. So if a girl turns up for training and she's maybe not feeling it, or she's not performing to her best, it's maybe bear in mind that there may be something more to it than just a lack of interest or a lack of motivation on a particular occasion, or to have a bad performance. The other thing is that we've certainly found, and we've had discussions about this at work, is that nutrition side of things, obviously with societal body image, maybe things that girls tend to turn up and they haven't necessarily eaten anything, and then they play and then they go home and they still don't eat anything afterwards, whereas the lads, they'll happily have a field of potatoes after a game. So it's trying to educate them on that side of things too. I suppose one thing I feel that is key to the whole thing is, and particularly from my perspective, is I don't get to see the players week in, week out. So the players that I would be working with would be coming from the various clubs into a summer program for a couple of months. So it's trying to get to know those players as quickly as you can and get to know as much about them. So one thing that I've implemented is like a player profile form. So on the player profile form, I'll ask them, when did they start playing rugby? Why did they start playing rugby? What's their rugby ambition? Where do they want to end up? And then maybe a few strengths and weaknesses, so as to get a good insight into them. And then there's one question that for any of the coaches out there that I think if you can remember one thing about what I've rambled on about, would be that I was at a talk with a guy called John Sullivan from the Changing the Game project, and there was a little question he posed that he said that every coach should ask. So on the bottom of my player profile form, I just asked him if Neal could know one thing about me to help him coach me better. It would be, and you'll get the amount of insight you'll get from that one question is unbelievable. So just from my own personal experience, there was a young girl that we would have used quite often for demonstration of things because she was a sort of underage international level, so very competent. And on her profile form to that question, she said that she gets very embarrassed and doesn't really being used in demonstrations. So that was a lesson learned for me.
Yeah, very good. That's a lot of insight there, Neal. Thank you. Gail, you've coached at primary school level in your previous roles. Do you find at that age grade there's a difference between how the boys and the girls take the instructions?
Absolutely. I think Kenny at the beginning said it really well. He talked about the egocentric and the task orientated player, and you find that most young girls in primary school, they're task orientated. You know, they want to be involved, they want to be in the process of the game. Competition isn't really, you know, high on their agenda. You know, and friendships, fun and friendships, and you'll really see a big difference in primary school ages of, you know, girls against boys. And Neal kind of touched on it there. I think the key word possibly was connection for girls. You know, they want that connection. You know, they want the coach to remember their name, but they don't necessarily want to be singled out or be in the limelight. You know, you find that a lot. There's maybe certain players as you move up the you know, the player pathway in the elite where, you know, they can handle it. They're more egocentric, you know, they can handle the limelight. They're the ones that want to do the interview, but there still be a majority, like Kenny said, that would be very task focused and just happy being part of the team. And it was interesting, Neal, just when you were talking about, but girls want that one-on-one, you know, they want to know that you care for them. And so that was key, actually, you putting that question in, because you do find that once you know a little bit about them, you know, their background, you know, maybe their family life, and you have that personal connection away from them just being a player, can really, really help their performance and their confidence within the team.
Absolutely. I think there's some themes coming through already in terms of connection, and we've talked about the difference in terms of egocentric, and we've got the other topics to talk through. So I think we're going to keep coming across the same bits. Tom, we're going to move on to you now, I think, and your quote is around confidence. So hopefully it'll come up on the screen. Okay, so your quote is, an inherent feeling of inferiority is common among women athletes. While self-doubt is not an experience exclusive to women, men do seem more adept at channeling confidence. And that quote comes from Rachel Piazza, Adjunct Professor of Women's and Gender Studies. So Tom, in your role with Olympic and Commonwealth high performance sports, I'm sure you've seen varying degrees of confidence. Would you agree with that statement that men just are a bit more confident, basically?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, I do, and I think it's a societal thing. Mm-hmm. I think things are changing. I think events like this really help raise the profile of women's sport. I think the Federation of Irish Sport 2020 project that was running was a really good incentive to put women's sport in the limelight, and trying to get more females engaged, put more females moving through the pathway. But there's a couple of real key things for me, and the first one is that when we're working with young girls, I think it's really important to not just think about developing their technical, tactical competencies. It's so much more than that. It's about developing their personal and social skills. And yes, we've already talked about connection, but it's also really important to develop their communication skills, their self-awareness, their emotional intelligence, and the reason for that is because if you get confident young girls, you get confident young players. So there's a real connection there between the two. So when coaches go out and work on the court, work in the field, work in the pool, just try to look at female players in a slightly different lens. Don't just look at them as athletes or players that they've got this set of technical skills and abilities, or they're very good tactically here. Try and think about their holistic development, think about them as individuals, and how can you grow their confidence as a person, because that will definitely carry over onto the competition environment. The second point is around, I think girls and young females struggle to separate the performance from the person. So what I mean from that is that I think men and young lads, they can put things in boxes a little bit more. So if they have a bad performance, they don't quite get their personal best, then they're able to leave that aside and think that's just my sport, and that doesn't affect their ego, that doesn't affect their confidence, their self-esteem. But for girls, it kind of does. And just to try to bring that to life a little bit, when I worked at the Commonwealth Games in 2010 in Delhi, I was coaching a young girl. She was 17, and she was playing the second round, as this is in the sport of badminton. So she was playing the second round against a world number 3 at the time, number 1 seed, and she had 3,000 shouting, cheering Indian fans behind the local player, who's an Indian player. So you can imagine the feeling that young player felt stepping out into the arena with all those people. She lost the first game 21-0. That's pretty rare in high performance badminton, but that was the difference in the level. And in the second set, it was a similar score up until 19-0, and then she eventually won a point. And basically the crowd were pretty hostile and pretty much mocked her. So yeah, she lost 21-0, 21-1. You can imagine the amount of repair, emotionally, that had to happen as a result of that. And trying to get her to think in a way which is, that is your badminton performance, that's not you as a person. And that was basically my strategy from 20 minutes after the match for probably about 6 months, because the confidence had really taken a bit of damage, taken damage. So I think boys can separate the performance from the person. I think girls take it a bit more personally, if I'm being honest. And yeah, that's probably my experience, actually.
Thank you. I think I even remember being slated by a coach when I was a young girl. It stayed with me however many years ago. Breeze, you've obviously been part of successful teams that have obviously had a lot of confidence given the accolades that you've had, but how much do you feel confidence is driven by the coach?
Yeah, I do agree. Like, the coach definitely instills confidence in the players. They have to, you have to know where you stand with a coach, where you stand as a player. And it's just about sitting down with the player and, as Tom said, getting to know them more personal without being too friendly with them, I think is probably the best way of doing it. Get to know them, but you're not getting too friendly with them. Some coaches just have a great way of getting the best out of you, and then others, they can wind you up maybe the wrong way, and it can actually drop your confidence as well. So I think it's huge. There's a fine line. I suppose reverse psychology, coaches can tend to try that as well. And I suppose I have over my time seen a little bit of that for myself. And I know how it is for other players when it happens. So no, it's nothing personal against coaches either. They're trying to read you the best they can as well, So yeah, I think getting to know the player themselves, and knowing when they need a boost or when they need a boot is probably is probably a huge part, really. As a coach, from a player's perspective, sometimes you need to be sat on the sideline to realize, okay, you're not going well, or sometimes you need to be put on and given as much time as possible to boost up your confidence. So yeah, I would agree with Tom that every player needs to be looked at properly. Yeah.
That's brilliant, thank you. I think we'll maybe move on to the next one. I'm conscious of time always. So our next topic is for Kenny, and it's around criticism. So we'll see it coming up on the screen. Okay, so that quote reads, "My coach said I run like a girl, and I said if he ran a little faster, he could too." And I love that, and it's from Maya Hamm, obviously American football player. So Kenny, I know from previous discussions you do not like the word criticism, and you prefer to talk about constructive feedback. So taking that on board and everything we've discussed, how do you approach constructive feedback, and can you give us any insights? Because I think what we just all need to remember with this event is, and the insights so far have been brilliant, that this is really to help coaches coach better with our younger females.
Well, what always sticks in my mind is what an experienced coach said to me one time. He said, anybody can coach the player, but there's very, very few who can coach the person. And this is actually good timing for me, because on Saturday, when we get to camp, we have got maybe 10 or 11 days before it, where we name the squad, who's in and who's not in. So I had 18 meetings on Saturday after training.
Gosh.
And of those 18, I think it was 12 I had to explain to them, to give them justifiable reasons why they weren't in the squad. And you can't go anywhere near criticism when you're bringing that one-to-one with them. So you look at, you speak to them about areas of development, and give them goals within your talk about where we see you getting better. And you know what? The girls, to every single one of them that was given negative news, appreciated the fact that they're being told in a one-to-one and given the reasons as to why they're not in the squad. Not one questioned my decision. And in the men's game, I always used to do that in the men's game too. If you're leaving a couple of players out or whatever applies, there can't be any criticism in your delivery, but it has to be about asking them to ask questions of themselves. Where do you think you can improve? And have a mutual understanding of the pathway that myself and my player are creating for them, both individually and collectively. And I think that's a proper way to do it, because I know so many players have told me the coaches name the squad and they don't want any of that hassle, whereas I think it's better that you have to justify something to them, because you don't want them driving up the road and thinking, I don't even know why I'm not in. So I've always adopted that attitude, and those 5-minute meetings are paramount to what you get out of your players again, because believe me, you'll need them further down the road, and you can't just ignore the girls and just leave them out of the squad. I don't think that's good practice at all. So that's my methodology in how you use the word criticism, but in how I can try to get them to stay above that pedestal where they might drop into mental issues and stuff like that. So I think that's a good policy in my opinion.
And it all seems to just come down to relationships, ultimately, and good communication. Gail, have you any thoughts around criticism and how to deliver or how to be constructive?
No, again, that's spot on from Kenny. I'm just nodding my head. I don't know if anybody could see me, but when he was talking, that's the perfect scenario for a girl, especially the ownership side of it, when that's the big thing that you probably see in the differences. Females want ownership, they want empowerment, and so when you're sitting down, and it has to come first, and you said it with the relationship, but the trust already that Kenny's talked about before. And if the coach, if there's trust from the player that the coach has knowledge and what he's actually talking about is making sense, and he's given the player the ownership and to go away and to work hard. And again, that all relates back to commitment, of getting that player back in because they're willing to go away and work hard and still stay involved, and that their feelings aren't getting hurt, or because take it as rejection of not being selected. But yeah, everything, even what Neal was talking about earlier, and I might be stealing Bridget's quote of their boot, and that's really effective as well. So all great things.
Well, funny, I was going to come to you next, Bridge. In your experience, having played, have you had bad experiences of having criticism? Have you had not the boost and the boot?
Yeah, I suppose I've had a bit of both. And I suppose when it came to the boot, I did deserve it. Sometimes I needed the boost too. But I just think, it goes back to as well, the player has to be willing to really listen to the coaches as well. And it might take a couple of situations where, it might take a couple of games where the trainer tells you after that you've had a great game that you realise it, or it might take a couple of days on the sideline to realise, okay, this is what I need to cap on now, I'm, whatever. So I think, you as a player, you have to be willing to listen, and sometimes it might take a bit of time to hear the right message, but I think, yeah, listening is a huge thing. And again, it comes back to the trainer getting to know the players as much as possible as well, without getting too friendly with them and stuff like that, so yeah.
And just back to you, Kenny, have you ever delivered constructive feedback and it hasn't been received well and you've had to try and rebuild that relationship? Have you any advice around that?
Yeah, excuse me, especially to a player that's knee deep in self-doubt, and I think it's important that you try and encourage them. I don't think I've fallen out with anyone ever, because they respect that you've taken the time out to give an analytical description of the areas that needs development. You've got to go into and keep your notes ready where, right, I think sometimes a player is left out of the team because of the opposition in our sport. So we're taking a look at the team. So I might say, like Ashley Hutton, I took her off at halftime in the game away to Belarus, not because of a bad player, not because of anything, but we were playing with 10 players. So I felt that Ash was the one that I would have to take off at halftime, because she'll not like me for this, but because of how long she's been in the game, she's been through the war with us, and I felt she was the right person who wouldn't have maybe as much energy as some of the others. And in that period of the last 45, she respected that. She respected that totally, and she understands why I had to make that decision.
Okay, thank you. It's all very insightful. So our next quote is around chemistry, and that's for Bree. So it'll just come up on the screen and then I'll read through it. Okay, so the males achieve their sense of self from their position in the hierarchy. The females from their position in the web symbolizing that each woman wants to feel connected to the other in some way, and that all women are on the same plane, and that one is not necessarily better than the other. And that's from Cathy de Boer, coach and author of Gender and Competition. We've touched on this a little bit earlier with Neal, but really what that quote is alluding to is that men are egocentric, and that women want that connection and they want to be part of that team and to feel valued. Breach, from your experience as a player, do you believe this to be true, or are there other things at play always?
I think girls just kind of like to probably keep things as calm as possible. I don't think girls like to give out to each other. I find, just listening to, we'll say, my husband, who plays football as well. He plays just club level, but he just, if there's something to be said on the pitch or said in the dressing room, it's said straight out, and everything's forgotten about straight after. I do feel with females, we're probably just a little bit more sensitive when it comes to, any issues. So I think we probably just try and get on a little bit better that way, and try not to cause any you know, any trouble within the camp and try and keep the camp as cool and calm as possible. And I just think that that's just our nature, and that's something, it's nothing to do with men over women. It's literally, I think, just our nature. I think we just try to keep things more calmer. Lads can fly off the handle and it's forgotten about. You know, I think girls it's kind of much harder to speak to female players at times. You know, I suppose looking at from my point of view, I would like to be told where I'm going wrong. Do I need to lose more weight? You know, whatever. That's something that I as a player, I would like to hear. But then I think sometimes a lot of other girls wouldn't like to hear that. And I think that's probably something we, especially I suppose as higher athletes, you know, I suppose playing intercounty and stuff like that, I think is something that we should be willing to take on board, especially to drive female sports more. We're behind the men all the time because of, you know, what would I say, we're afraid nearly to go to professional and I think to get up to that professional level and get up to that real match in the males, we have to be ready to take the you know, whatever we need to be. I know, Kenny, you don't like the constructive criticism. What's your line you say?
Constructive feedback. Constructive feedback.
Constructive feedback, yeah. So I think as females, sports people, we need to be ready to take that, and I think that's how we're going to improve our game, and that's looking at it from the ladies football and the camogie side of things. I know, obviously, as you know, athletes will say you know, when you're on your own, it might be you're willing to do it, but I think as teams, individually, we all need to be ready for that feedback as well, and I think that's what's really going to push you know, ladies football, and it's really going to push camogie to get to a higher level. And just at the moment, I think we don't really do that that much, and I just think that'll take us to an extra level. So I suppose coming back to the court, I think that's where we are at the moment. We just like to keep things calmer and not upset people too much. But I do feel that, you know, if you want to improve your team, if you want to improve as a team, you really have to be ready to see where you need to go wrong. And I think Kenny touched on it, and Gail was saying it, that sit down with the player and you're not criticizing them. You just want to get the best out of them, and that's what's becoming trying to win anything. Every player has to get the best out of themselves and drive each other on. So yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. And Tom, do you feel, based on that quote around males achieving their sense of worth from the hierarchy, have you seen that within your experience of different sports?
Yeah, absolutely. It's law of the jungle, isn't it? It's the alpha male, trying to get to the top. And I think you've only got to look at any breaks in play, any breaks in training practice. What the lads doing? They're always messing about, doing little competitions, trying to invent little games, whereas the women tend to be socialising and chatting, or keeping the calm, as Bree would say. So you can definitely see examples of that. But I think the key thing as a coach is to make your practice design, I suppose, around the wants and the needs of the players. Because if you recognise that males and females are a little bit different, then allow the lads, where there is a bit of opportunity for informal play, to go and mess about and compete with each other, because informal play does develop creativity and it does develop skills that we need within players. So it's not a bad thing that they are egocentric. I think it's egos is not necessarily a bad thing if it's under control, and it's a healthy ego. But it does definitely come down to the law of the jungle. It's about how we were as hunter-gatherers, right? So you just got to recognise the social aspects around all that and how it is different between men and women.
Absolutely. And Neal, in terms of the coaching within women's rugby, do you feel that I really don't like that quote, but that quote around the web and feeling connected, do you see that a lot yourself?
Yeah, I think certainly, as I sort of alluded to earlier, teamwork sort of comes more naturally. Obviously, there's individual personalities can sometimes maybe be exceptions, but I think from a coaching perspective, it's trying to sort of monopolize on that, and to try and encourage a sort of self-responsibility and an empowerment, and a sort of sense of togetherness. So, you know, that's the strength of the female athlete. So why not harness it to its best? So something I've tried to implement over the last few years, and I'll be honest with you, it's still sort of tricky, is sort of peer coaching. So rather than being the sort of traditional say or do as I say, it's trying to get them collectively to get that identity together. You know, after all, on the pitch, I ain't there to make the decisions when I'm on the pitch. So during training, they need to be able to make the decisions and learn from their mistakes. So if they're feeding back to each other what they did well, what they necessarily didn't do well. The other thing is, you know, you can't see everything on a training session, you know. So if there's a training session, you're asking the girls to feed back to each other. Now, what I would say is, when I first started trying to do it, the players sort of looked at me and it was like, you want us to tell each other? And, you know, sort of, you walk over and the two players just looking at each other, completely silent. And it's, you know, you have to try and facilitate that and say, well, you know, what do you think she did well? Or can you give her one thing that maybe an area of development? So I think it's something from a coaching perspective, if you can try and get yourself away from the fact is you're the fountain of all knowledge, and get that sort of empower the players a little bit more and get them involved. I'm trying to make the coaching process a little bit more of a two-way conversation than just a sort of dictatorship, I feel like. Then
that sounds about right. I love the fact of moving away from the dictatorship and giving the team the opportunity to help coach each other as well. Our next quote is around commitment, and we're going to speak to Gail for this one. So the quote should come up on the screen. Okay, our quote is, "It is about having trust in one another as coaches and players, having a truthful and respected partnership." And that quote's from Tandy Haughey, Course Director of Sports Coaching and Performance Degree Programme at Ulster University. So Gail, commitment means different things to different people. But in terms of that player-coach commitment to the sport, we've touched on it a wee bit earlier, but how do you build that as a coach?
I think it has to do all about the environment that you create. You know, I think with some buzzwords that we've already chatted to tonight, you know, about the fun, how you create fun, how you create enjoyment, how the coach, if it's coach-led, how they create, how do they talk to them? I think Kenny was, you know, really focused on that, of, you know, the words that you use. If it is, you're trying to give them feedback, is it one-on-one? Is it right in front of everybody? Is it not? Like, how consistent, if we're still on the coach, how consistent are you in the coach of, you know, how you pick, how you select your team, if they come to training, if they don't come to training, and then also around just your feedback of even how you actually coach them and in the game and how it's led. And, you know, I think, you know, with the quote, you know, trust being just a massive one, and it's trust in all different roles. It's trust to know that you have knowledge, you know, and you know tactically what you're talking about, and then the trust that you actually do invest in them as people. And I think, you know, that's been talked about so much throughout. I think for me, like, for commitment, it's definitely a talked about topic within women's football in Northern Ireland. I know Kenny chatted really early about the numbers that we have in the women's game, and you know, that's one thing that we've been trying to grow, and we've been looking at all different kind of research to get young girls committed to the sport earlier. And thankfully, you know, UEFA's really taken that on board, and there's loads of really good research out there to show how important the environment is, and then massively. And I can even just look at my own career, but the role of the parent, you know, everyone just thinks the role of the parent at the grassroots level, but, you know, throughout, I'm sure Breach and maybe be able to chat about it too, but the role of parents and having those people that champion you, you know, throughout your career is really important as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gail. We're now going to bring in Tandy, who wrote the quote. And can you see us, Tandy? Are you there?
I can, yes, thanks, Anne.
Hi, Tandy. So specifically in terms of women, what role can coaches play in maintaining that interest in sport as, you know, girls enter adulthood and their commitment maybe wavers as other things come into play in terms of responsibilities and things? What can coaches do to try and support?
I think the critical thing, Anne, is to think about all coaches as influencers. And I think from an early age, what we need to do is we need to change the intentions, change the behaviour. And I think if we get the right behaviour from an early age, the growth and passion for being involved in activity will stay with them. It's only going to come down, you know, if coaches do have the right influencing factors, understanding the learners. And I think we always have to understand coaches have got a critical role to play, and even teachers have a critical role to play to grow the passion and the love of being involved in activity for lifelong involvement in sport and physical activity. You know, thinking, and everybody has highlighted this evening about the context and thinking about the environment. But when we really think about the context, putting the learner at the centre of it, you know, who they actually are, why they're actually there to be involved in what you're actually delivering, how you go about doing that, and then, you know, the what. So all too often, it's very dictatorial, and it has been highlighted this evening about the directness sometimes about what happens in our sporting environment. So we have to be creative and innovative in how we go about delivering through those instructional methods that we actually use. Because, and Tom put it nicely earlier on, it's not just about that technical and tactical. We are developing and want to develop to have the ability to view the whole person and holistic development, understanding their coaching philosophy and the importance of the coaching philosophy and what role that really does have to play. And you've all highlighted this evening, which is really lovely, about the respect and the trust and the relationships. And it takes time to build relationships across, and you have to take the knock sometimes, and you have to rise above it. But what we really think about is developing those 5 C's. I know we've talked about C's this evening, but we go back and we think about how do we build up the competence of the performers? How do we think about building their character? How do we look at building their collaboration? That's about teamwork, and that takes time. You know, you've got new people coming in. I know Kenny has got new people coming in and out of his team, and it takes time for those relationships to build across the team as well. We have to think about the communication, the style and approach we actually do. And then finally, the commitment. And it's been very, very clear, you know, you have to be very committed if you want to achieve at the high level. And it's about having fun and about not only the players having fun, but the coaching team having fun and making the connections together. But it all comes down to the coach understanding themselves. And really taking a step back and reflecting upon what they can do and how they can really channel young people that you're working with, or even adults you're working with, to really become a habit, that their involvement in activity is a habit and they will want to do it and continue to do it throughout the whole of their life.
Thank you, Tandy. That kind of brings to a close the formal discussion, and we're going to go into the Q&A. But just before we do, Kenny mentioned at the very start, and I wrote it down, women will do more for a male than for a female. And he talked about that paternal relationship, and it just caught my interest. So I wanted us just to discuss that. Do you all agree? Gail, maybe put you in the hot seat.
Yes and no, I guess. You know, I think what was said before about the respect. I think when you know, this maybe speak for myself as a former player, that the respect when you have a coach that is clear and he's consistent, or she's clear, she's consistent in how they treat you and how they communicate, then I think it's just easier buy-in. I think girls are probably maybe sometimes a wee bit open-minded, you know, to new things and to maybe tactical changes if it's explained and communicated well.
And Breege, I'm sure you had an opinion on that.
Yeah, I suppose I just think it comes back to, you know, you have to get to know your players. I think it really comes back to that. Like, not every player is the same, or you know every player is going through different things, and I think you just have to come back to your player and, you know, just make sure that you're trying to get the best out of them the best way you can, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I would think, you know, you just have to get to know your player, and you know, it's all about how you give this feedback to them and stuff like that. You know, it's all about the tone of the voice and things like that. So they're really important things.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think doesn't really matter whether you're a man or a woman, really, to be honest. It's not, you know, if you keep in mind that, you know, why they're playing. So, you know, if you can provide a learning environment and an environment that tallies in with that. So, you know, if you can make it fun, they want to be with friends, they want to learn new skills, they want to feel competent, you know, and try and avoid the things that maybe turn young girls off the sport, which, you know, maybe being too serious, being too pushy, having too much of an emphasis on winning. I think, you know, probably coaches don't have much awareness of their own behaviours. You know, the players under the spotlight at every session, but the coach maybe it's getting a bit of feedback on how you carry yourself and being able to improve your own delivery, you know, maybe that's through coach observation or having, you know, recording your sessions and being self-critical of yourself. And you might find that, you know, there's things you're doing wrong. It's not actually the players. It's maybe things that you're doing wrong. That it's not necessarily that they're willing to do something more willing to do something for a male or a female. It's that relationship. Have you got that good relationship with them? And whether you're male or female, if you've got that good relationship and that trust and respect that Tandy talked about, then I think that's you're on a winner there, you know.
I think that seems to be the theme for the entire discussion. Everything comes down to good relationships and good communication. And okay, well, we'll go to a few questions. A few have come up on my screen here. Do you think reverse psychology works with women when trying to get the best from them? It's going to turn into like a counselling session. Tom, what would your thoughts on that be?
If I was being honest, I wouldn't be a fan, just because I think you could end up tripping yourself up a little bit because you're not being honest, you're not being true to what you really believe. So you can end up telling an athlete, oh, you're working really hard, but actually, you know, they're not. And it's just creating a false sense of securities within people. I think psychology is great, and every coach is what I would call a mini psychologist. But you know, you can get in trouble if you start doing those. I've seen those little mind tricks and stuff. No, it's just being deadly honest with people and creating relationships that you can get on and you can work together. So the short answer is no, it probably wouldn't be my approach. It might be my approach with my wife at home, but
that's for another discussion, maybe.
Definitely not players. Yeah, I think just being truthful and honest is by far the best way to coach.
Kenny, I think I'll bring that question to you as well. Do you think reverse psychology works with female athletes?
No, I've never really used reverse psychology because it impinges on the integrity of what you do. Yeah. And I think you can never roam into that avenue where you're ruining your whole thing you set up. You're honest with people, you talk about trust, and then you bring distrust into it. So I don't think that's a good way to do things, no.
Yeah. Another question is coming in, and apologies, I can't see who these questions are from, but thank you for everyone that sent them in. How do you deal effectively with personality clashes amongst teams in female teams? Gail, do you want to maybe lead on that one?
Thanks. I think it probably goes back to like your core values within your team. You know, if you're in a team and you have like certain rules, we call them core values in ours, but it goes down to that, where, you know, if you do have a disagreement, you know, when it's on the pitch, it's left on the pitch, and if you haven't been able to agree, you know, you'd maybe discuss it afterwards, then it's over. So I think it goes down to probably your key leaders within your team. I think that's always been paramount to any of the teams that I have coached, to really give empowerment to team leaders. So if there is issues that they're aware of it and they can possibly squish it pretty quick, you know, Breach did allude to, you know, girls like Cam, they do, you know, they don't necessarily want to be in a team that's constantly, you know, fighting, or, you know, there's back chat. You know, and again, it's coming down to have that common goal, you know, of what your goals are as your team and what you're trying to achieve together. And I've just found that's always worked, you know, when you bring it back to the team, and it's not about individuals and, you know, their wants and desires, but it's about what's best for the team. And that seems to be effective for what I've done and the successes that I've been able to have in the teams that I've been on.
Brilliant. Another question has come in. Do the panel feel that there is still a taboo around allowing for menstrual cycles within respective games, be it netball, rugby, football? And I suppose it is a bit of a taboo at times, but one that we as coaches of females should be more than aware of. So who wants to take that one on?
I think probably, I don't think it's a taboo. I think it's maybe a, only one of our players, for a university project, but I suppose there's maybe as a male, it comes back to Kenny's thing, as a male coaching a female team, it's probably harder for me or a player to come to me and say that, whereas if it's a female to a female coach, it's maybe a little bit easier. What we try and do from our perspective is we try and always have a female involved in the coaching panel, whether that's in a management role or a coaching role, so that we've always got that balance. So when there are those sort of more delicate issues, that can be broached and dealt with, because, you know, the players have to feel comfortable. You know, quiet word can be said. You know, if you know, Zoe knows that such and such, you know, is having a bad day, then you can mention it, and, you know, we're talking maybe after training and say, oh, she was terrible tonight, you know, we'll get a reason why. So I think it's a taboo. I think it's maybe I think it's a societal thing that maybe needs to be a little bit less taboo.
Anybody else?
I have can I come in?
Yeah, absolutely.
I always build a committee in my team. It's usually the captain and the two most experienced players, so they're the go-to committee. So if a woman has a problem like that, they go to the committee, and then a committee member will come to me and say, Kenny, we bit of an issue, blah, 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 with this. So the menstrual cycle would come into that category, yeah, where the girl can't come to me. She doesn't have to come to me. It can be that through one of the senior players. So they have a clear understanding of that.
There's definitely ways to manage it, and rightly said, Neil, it's not a taboo. Okay, we've another question if we're happy to keep going. This comes in from Matt. There was a lot of talk during the conversation there about habit. What are the coaches' opinions on how this will be affected by COVID? And Matt feels that there's potential for a drop off in participation, and we've all seen it, you know, with all the restrictions. How do we keep building that habit and ensure a return to participation when we're allowed?
Was that Matt Hancock? No.
We are not going near politics, Kenny. Tom, do you want to maybe pick up on that one?
Yeah, I think there will be potentially a drop off. I think to make sure it's as minimal as possible, then I think when we're trying to engage people in participation and getting back to sport and physical activity, we need to, first of all, we need to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. And we need to make it attractive. So we need to be thinking about how motivated are they going to be to get back? How easy is it for them to get back to it? And what is the timing of it? Because the last thing you want to do is the restrictions to be lifted and sport being allowed back, but then the governing body or the club isn't ready to then deliver their programs. Because there's like a week or 2 weeks in between, then you kind of like lost that momentum of everybody. It's a little bit like after Christmas, isn't it? You've had Christmas and everyone wants to get back into exercise on the Monday. This is going to be a little bit like COVID. Everyone's going to want to get back to playing sport and doing physical activity as soon as you can. So sports governing bodies, clubs, they need to be ready for that, and they need to make it as easy as possible, and then we need to make it attractive. And if they do that, then we can hopefully get back to the levels we were before.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. And there's a few more questions have come in, so we'll keep going if everyone's happy. If a player loses confidence in their coach, do you think it's possible to rebuild that relationship? And Breed, I'm going to come to you with that.
Yeah, I think it is possible if one player does lose confidence. The question is how many within the group lose confidence. And I think, you know, if it becomes a bigger group than just a single person, I think it's very hard to rebuild that. Because, you know, it's just, I suppose this is from a team point of view. Everyone needs to be on the same hymn sheet. Players and management all need to be in the same hymn sheet. If there's one person, I think if you lose, like, you know, you have the other players around. If you lose confidence in a coach, you have other players around you to, you know, keep you going well, to, you know, you can listen to other players. But I think if there's a lot of people lose confidence, I think that's where a problem comes, and it would be hard to rebuild the relationship again, you know. So I suppose it's kind of a broad question in ways. If it's just one person losing confidence, I think you can rebuild it because there's a whole team around you. But if there's a few players within the team lose it, I do find it's quite hard to get back that confidence within a management team. I would think anyway.
Yeah. Okay, if everyone's happy, we'll keep going while the chat's good. So there's another question has come in from Danielle. Name one obvious strength that females bring to the pitch, or well, any sporting environment. Gail, do you want to take that one?
I think there's more than one.
Yeah, good. That's why we're all here.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of probably chatted to them, you know, a lot about them tonight, you know, about how their commitment, how you know, their love for the game, you know. I think it was Tom maybe or had talked about even the tactical. I think it was Neal, sorry, that chatted just about how they want to be coached, how they're like sponges, they want more information. You know, they're open to different styles. And he kind of said that the rugby was a purer rugby. You know, sometimes we find in football that, you know, some people say women's football isn't technical enough. You know, we would possibly disagree now. We think it is very technical. We think, you know, maybe the past, and it's probably more of a team sport than just a couple of individuals. So to me, there's so many attributes that the females bring to the game.
Anybody else?
I would say that I don't know what it is, but if you were to ask me would I want to go back to coach lads, that definite answer is no. So there's obviously something, but I don't know what it is, but it's a heck of a lot more enjoyable, I find. Brilliant.
Well, hopefully a lot of coaches will be watching this and they'll hear that and feel encouraged. We have another question, Tandy, it's for you. Basic psychological need theory. And I don't know what that is, should we be introducing it to coaches and how can it be implemented? And that's from Taylor.
I'm going to direct that to my two students over here, Neal and Tom. What we're talking about here is sort of like self-determination theory. And I think everybody really has addressed that this evening and using different, using different terminology. And I think that's the important thing. So really what we're talking about is about autonomy, the need for autonomy. So we're thinking about how we give ownership across for the learning to our young people. We're thinking about the need for competence and the way that Kenny highlighted, you know, in terms of ego and tasks. So what we're looking at, achievement goal theory, how they are measuring themselves against themselves, and then the need for relatedness. And I think we've all talked about that in terms of relationships. So that's really what basic psychological need is. It's about self-determination theory. And you've all talked about it this evening, but a lot of the time whenever academics come on and start using the jargon, I think that's where the difficulty comes and arises. If you look at a common sense approach, are you looking at the learner? Are you creating that environment that we are ensuring that the learner learns and is very proactive in their learning, that we engage them with that, and we have those good relationships? That's what basic psychological needs are. So hopefully I'll answer the question now.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
We appreciate Candy's dumb version for us.
My pleasure, Gail. I always try and do it that way. It's much easier.
Okay, well, look, we've ran over on our time, so we'll maybe wrap it up there. Can I just thank you all so much for taking part this evening? It's been a really enjoyable and interesting discussion, and something certainly that I hope you have all enjoyed as much as I have. From an Electric Ireland point of view, this is obviously a really important part of our Game Changers campaign, and we want to really continue to provide practical and insightful supportive help for women's sport out there. And we want to continue to change the game for women across Northern Ireland and beyond, so there's more opportunities to participate and to enjoy and watch and talk about sport. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed it. The conversation will, I think, continue probably within our WhatsApp group for the panel, but certainly on social media if you use the hashtag GameChangersNI. So thank you all very, very much for joining us this evening.